found some, no split, clown bum. Your gold hit sound dumb, hold it now, crown them. Where you found them at, got them round town. Could've drowned in it, would've floated, bloated, voted, sugar-coated, loaded, hip shooter. Draw full of poor, free, coffee at the banks. Hit through the straw, none more for me, thanks. That blanks the roar, that dang sure stank lip. Sank past the pit for more hardcore prank spit. Crank it on blast, roll past Front Street. Blew the whole spot like some old ass with skunk meat. These kids is too fast, juiced off a junk tree. Who could get loose off a crunk or a funk beat?
Hello everyone, welcome in. In this video, we are going to be discussing reasonable doubt. We're going to be comparing the Karen Read evidence to the Alexee Trevizo evidence. And I think Karen Read is a perfect example of reasonable doubt because she is on her second trial. Her first trial ended in a mistrial, which means there was reasonable doubt. Now, it is a good comparison to Alexee Trevizo's case for the reasons listed here under reasonable doubt. Now, everything listed under reasonable doubt seems to be things that have worked in Karen Read's favor in resulting in the first mistrial and potentially a not guilty or mistrial for her second trial. Now, these are also things that cannot be successfully deployed by the defense in Alexee Trevizo's case, in my opinion. And that is why I think that this is a great comparison as to what actual reasonable doubt is and how a jury is going to view reasonable doubt when it comes to the evidence in Alexee Trevizo's case. Now, that has to start out with us explaining some of the evidence in Karen Read's case if you've not followed it at all. Essentially, Karen Read is being accused by the Commonwealth of hitting her then boyfriend, John O'Keefe, at the time with her car on a blizzarding night after a night of drinking when dropping John O'Keefe off at a residence at 34 Fairview Road. John O'Keefe allegedly, according to the Commonwealth, never went inside the house, so no one inside the house could have harmed John O'Keefe, according to the Commonwealth's theory. But Karen Read is claiming that she never hit John O'Keefe with her car. In fact, she had no motive to hit John O'Keefe with her car, and that she is innocent. Some of the evidence that is brought forth in this case is mostly witness statements surrounding the night of John O'Keefe's death, the autopsy of John O'Keefe, and most importantly, phone and car data that has been extracted from John O'Keefe's phone, Karen Read's phone, and Karen Read's car that allegedly hit John O'Keefe. Now, speaking of hit John O'Keefe, the last thing that is important in this case is the alleged confession of Karen Read to the witnesses saying, I hit him. It is being battled back and forth by the defense and the Commonwealth in that case as to whether Karen Read said, I hit him, or could I have hit him? Did I hit him? After finding John O'Keefe's dead body on the lawn of 34 Fairview in the blizzarding conditions after him not arriving home that night after she claims to have dropped him off at that house. The defense has built reasonable doubt in many ways that Alexee Trevizo cannot build reasonable doubt. There is no possible way that she will ever be able to, in a trial for the murder of baby Alex, be able to craft a defense as reasonable as Karen Read's, as plausible as what the defense in Karen Read's case is alleging. Now, because we are still waiting on the Supreme Court to make a decision on whether or not the state will get their evidence back in the Alexee Trevizo case, we will still be operating like we have our hands tied behind our back and are working with limited evidence in this case. Like I have always said, even if this evidence was not returned to the state for some reason and the Supreme Court upholds the district court's decision, then we still have an extremely strong case based off the hallway video, the autopsy of baby Alex, the hospital statements that they will be allowed to talk about and give on the stand, and the things that they remember from that night regarding baby Alex. Should we not get all this evidence back and the hospital staff are not allowed to make statements about what Alexee said to them that night, there is still a wide amount of evidence, just so much evidence pointing to Alexee Trevizo being the one who put baby Alex in the trash, and the consciousness of guilt that follows from Alexee Trevizo clearly not having told anyone about putting the baby in the trash. The jury will very quickly be able to pick up on the fact that the hospital would have reacted should they have known a baby was stuffed in the trash, suffocating in a plastic bag. They wouldn't have just ignored Alexee saying something like that. They will get to fill that hole in time where the staff wouldn't be allowed to speak about that at this current juncture due to the suppression of this evidence by the district court. But the jury still gets to make up in their mind what that time frame entailed. And clearly, Alexee never told anyone about the baby. So we don't need Alexee's statements about being pregnant, not being pregnant, pregnancy tests, any of that to prove Alexee knew a baby came out of her. She hid the baby and then never told anyone about the baby until forced. That takes away basically all reasonable doubt. But we're going to go through each one of these points individually to show just how dangerous for the Alexee Trevizo case it is to try and attempt to use any of the tactics to build reasonable doubt that the Karen Read defense has used. So we can start at the top of this list, which is blaming witnesses. That is the best way I can boil down what Karen Read's defense is trying to do when they are pointing out all of the flaws in the Commonwealth's case. Essentially, Karen Read is trying to point the finger at these potential other witnesses, people who were inside the house of the lawn that John O'Keefe's body was found on, that they potentially harmed John O'Keefe. We don't know exactly what, we don't know exactly how, but we just know that these people did it, not our client. That's essentially what they're trying to get at in a roundabout way. And they've done a good job as far as the public relations are concerned, as building a lot of doubt as to what really happened that night. And that has a lot to do with the Commonwealth's missteps and issues that they have with their own evidence when trying to bring a murder case. So with that, blaming witnesses is strategic in Karen Read's case. They aren't as sympathetic as the witnesses will be in Alexee Trevizo's case. Now, I put this at the top of the list because it has become very apparent that the defense attorney for Alexee Trevizo, through his multiple interviews that he's done with different outlets, has attempted to shove off the blame onto the hospital. Now, this isn't just willy-nilly us getting that vibe from what he's saying. There are lawsuits against, a lawsuit against Dr. Vasquez and the hospital. I say lawsuits because their first one was brought improperly, so they had to bring a second one. And they have hinted in some of their more recent filings at potentially bringing a civil lawsuit in regards to this case. And that, in my opinion, and I'm sure you guys can tell me if it's your opinion too, offends the senses of most people. Most people who look at the facts of the Alexee Trevizo case say, what on earth could the hospital have done better or differently to save baby Alex's life? They couldn't, because they were intentionally locked out of the bathroom in which Alexee Trevizo gave birth to baby Alex that had a pull cord for help. Alexee Trevizo's mother showed up under a minute outside that bathroom door, which, according to Alexee Trevizo's own attorney, would be the time Alexee was looking at the baby that had come out of her. And she declined assistance from her mother. She declined assistance from nurses who asked and knocked on the door, and was only coming out of that bathroom once she was under threat of key. She opened the door right as the key was brought to the lock. That is not something you can blame on the hospital staff, not successfully in front of a jury in a criminal trial. You need evidence that the hospital staff covered up the birth and death of baby Alex. when the evidence that we currently have that's not suppressed shows that that's not the case, because we have the hallway footage of Alexee going in and out of the bathroom and the bathroom being cleaned and baby Alex being found. So Karen Read has been very successful at causing reasonable doubt within the witnesses in her own trial. And that will never be able to be the case for Alexee Trevizo. The blaming of the witnesses in the Karen Read trial has been considered somewhat of a conspiracy, and the doubt around that claim for the people who think Karen Read is guilty, and it is another reasonable doubt, is that it's very hard to commit a conspiracy, to have a heat of the moment crime be covered up successfully. Now, what lends to the potential that Karen Read is guilty and that there is potentially a cover up or conspiracy happening amongst the witnesses being brought in to testify against Karen Read is that there are very, very odd instances and things that have happened surrounding the Karen Read case and these witnesses' actions, such as destroying of phones, such as not wanting to talk to the FBI when they investigate and having 5 different phone calls made in that time frame by one of the witnesses, one of the star witnesses against Karen Read. A lot of their movements and inconsistent testimonies show that maybe there is something to the blaming of the witnesses that has seemed to be successful by the Karen Read case. Alternatively, thinking about the evidence that will be presented in the Alexee Trevizo case, such as simply the hallway video and the autopsy of baby Alex, it will be very off-putting and offensive to the jury should they try to paint this as some conspiracy against Alexee. They don't have the proper witnesses to build that conspiracy on. Why? Because the hospital staff very much look like victims themselves. They very much seemed traumatized. They very much were shocked by finding baby Alex and very much had to call his time of death after saying he was not able to be revived. That was not what they were expecting when the staff was cleaning the bathroom. No one expects that to be the case. They expect medical emergencies that are in their face that they can deal with, not hidden away under trash and blood cleaned up off the ground and pregnancies that aren't told to them. That's not what they're used to. That's not a witness that you can blame, that you can make a grand conspiracy that the hospital did something wrong and covered it up. And there has been hints that the defense attorney and the defense in this case is to blame everyone but the defendant for these actions. But those are not sympathetic witnesses to blame for the jury. They will be aggravated and offended when you blame the other victims of the crime. They may not be baby Alex themselves, the core victim, the heart of this case, but they were traumatized themselves, which is going to lead us into our next point, the inconsistencies. Now, this part is not the most positive part, but we have to be realists here. And if we are to prepare ourselves for the trial that will happen for Alexee Trevizo, we cannot go in thinking that everything is going to be perfect. The number one thing that I foresee being an issue in this case is going to be inconsistencies in the witness statements, particularly the hospital staff. Why? Like I just said, they were in shock. They were traumatized. Oh, but they're hospital staff. They should know what's going on. Like I just said, this ain't what they're used to. They're not used to finding babies hidden in trash cans. So I think there's a pretty strong argument, just to begin, that their shock and trauma can lend to some of the inconsistencies that we have. We will go over all the inconsistencies that we have from the night of January 27th, the actual night of the incident, and the hospital staff interviews, because there are minor inconsistencies that we will tally up and we will go over in a long video as we get closer to trial and know what our evidence is, because that will better help us go through those videos. But with that, these inconsistencies are going to happen, and they're going to try to be exploited by the defense, as they are being exploited by the defense in the Karen Read trial. Now, the inconsistencies in the Karen Read trial lend more to reasonable doubt and the conspiracy, quote unquote, of the witnesses potentially covering up what may have actually happened to John O'Keefe. These inconsistencies that will happen in the Alexee Trevizo case, the hospital staff statements, are not maliciously inconsistent, and they are not to further some sort of conspiracy for any of their own purposes. They don't have any stake in the game. Currently, Dr. Vasquez and Artesia General Hospital are being sued civilly, but it's up in the air as to if that will even be stayed or paused until this criminal case is resolved, or at least until the Supreme Court comes back with their decision. And so who knows what could happen with that case by the time we actually get to the criminal trial, because you could maybe get that case thrown out very early on once it actually starts to heat up civilly. So they may not even have that to hold over the doctor's head at that time. But there are no things that they can throw at the hospital to say you're trying to hide or cover up, or there's a conspiracy as to the death of baby Alex. The one issue that the defense will try and bring up with that is the morphine in baby Alex's system, which has been discussed over and over again by people who are much more medically knowledgeable than I. And they have stated that the amount of morphine in baby Alex's system could not, and just flat out did not cause the death of baby Alex. It just didn't. It wasn't enough to cause the death of baby Alex. Many babies are born with high amounts of morphine and high amounts of illicit drugs in their system, and they survive. They sometimes need medical intervention, but they don't kill the baby upon birth just because they are exposed to drugs. There are medical interventions that can happen that save babies' lives, and that was denied baby Alex, should the morphine have ever even been an issue, which I do not concede, if Alexee Trevizo had simply asked for help. I digress on that. That's just my opinion. But when it comes to the inconsistencies that they're going to try and exploit and try and use the little things that the hospital could have done, or the things that they are getting wrong on the stand to make them look bad, or to try and attempt to impeach them in any way, I don't think is going to be favorable with the jury. I think it will be very much understood that, number one, this is going to be at least 3 to 5 years from the date of the incident. Who knows when we'll get to trial at this point? It'll have been a long time since the incident happened. They can refresh their memory, and when their memory is refreshed and the evidence is shown to the jury as to what is refreshing the memory of these witnesses, they're going to say, oh, they weren't lying to us. They weren't trying to hide anything from us. They just didn't know, and it actually looks kind of chaotic in the moment. Of course they didn't remember. It's not how Karen Read is being able to capitalize on the inconsistencies that have happened in these witnesses' statements and actions throughout the course of the investigations and trials of Karen Read. With that, we can move on to consciousness of guilt, because this is one where there is a lot in the Alexee Trevizo case and not very much in the Karen Read case. Now, consciousness of guilt is a very interesting aspect to everything, because it's where perception meets the facts. And typically, most facts are interpreted based on what the fact is. This is a fact, and you'll take it as such. When consciousness of guilt is at play, the same set of facts can register differently to different jurors, meaning maybe a statement or action of a defendant registers as something a guilty person would do to one juror and would completely fly under the radar as something a guilty person would do to another juror. So that makes consciousness of guilt very tricky when you're trying to imply that something makes someone guilty indirectly. But with that, sometimes consciousness of guilt actions are so strong that it immediately impacts the juror and the people witnessing the evidence in the case heavily. There are some actions and statements that are so clearly odd, out of left field, trying to obfuscate or lie, that just register immediately all the way down to the bones of the people watching. as consciousness of guilt for whoever is saying or doing that action. In the Karen Reed case, there isn't many things that the Commonwealth can point to show that Karen Reed had consciousness of guilt that night, specifically due to them having to go back and forth on what Karen Reed's actual statements are, as far as saying, I hit him, did I hit him? And it does seem to be a bit odd for Karen Reed to go out with a group of others to try and search for John O'Keefe after having intentionally murdered him, and then to arrive upon the body with a group of people who are now going to be watching your every move, group of people who are very involved with the police department after allegedly just murdering a fellow police officer. It doesn't register as consciousness of guilt to many people. Now, compare that to what happened in the Alexee Trevizo case. We must skip over, due to the Supreme Court still not having a decision on the evidence, any of the statements Alexee made at the hospital prior to the hospital hallway footage kicking in. That's where we have to mentally begin this case as far as this point until the evidence is returned, which we are still hopeful and thinking is very likely the case. Now, if we start at the hospital hallway footage, the jurors can already attempt to make up in their mind why and how Alexee had been at the hospital for some period of time and pregnancy wasn't acknowledged or found out. At this current juncture, we have to leave that as a pause and an unknown, but the jury will still wonder that should this evidence still be suppressed, and they just have to pick up at the hospital hallway footage. Now, they will see Alexee Trevizo run down that hallway quickly, grabbing her undercarriage, locking herself in the bathroom. First act of consciousness of guilt. Alexee Trevizo removed herself from the presence of others at the time of birth. If the jury believes Alexee Trevizo knew she was pregnant to any degree, based on the rest of the consciousness of guilt that we'll get to, this is already being established by her going into the bathroom for the birth. Now, the second piece of consciousness of guilt actually comes from a witness, but lends to the guilt of the defendant, Alexee Trevizo. And that is Rosa, Alexee's mother, showing up outside the bathroom door in under a minute from when Alexee entered. That is suspicious. It doesn't register as the mother of a teenage daughter who is simply there for back pain, as alleged. It seems as though someone might have been highly concerned as to what was going on. Why is that helpful? Well, let's say we still don't get our evidence back, and we don't have Rosa saying, I just asked you to tell me the truth. What did you do to it? To Alexee in regards to what happened to baby Alex in that bathroom. If we don't have those statements, you can still attempt to imply, based on Rosa showing up outside that bathroom door so quickly, that this was out of norm. This was not normal. This was out of the usual. Even Rosa felt that something was off, because why would she show up so quickly if Alexee just had to use the bathroom and poop, according to the defense? It doesn't make sense. Why would that register as a potential emergency to Rosa? That will lend to consciousness of guilt. Alexee Trevizo being in the bathroom, cleaning up the blood, hiding baby Alex under a fresh liner in the trash can, and then proceeding to not tell anyone about baby Alex's birth are all indicators of consciousness of guilt as to the murder charge. Why? Because you would only leave someone to die that you hoped to die, which brings us back to the Karen Reed case. They allege that Karen Reed left John O'Keefe on that lawn to die, but they have not offered any proof that Karen Read wanted John O'Keefe to die. There is very much a lack of motive for Karen Read to have killed John O'Keefe based on what the Commonwealth has presented in that case. Whereas with the Alexee Trevizo case, a lot of consciousness of guilt can be implied simply by Alexee not informing anyone of baby Alex's birth. Most people will imply, based on those actions, that she did not want anyone to not only know about baby Alex, but not find baby Alex. And should the autopsy, which we will be getting to with the cause of death, be strong enough, which I believe it is, to prove that baby Alex was indeed born alive, then by all means, Alexee Trevizo must have intended to murder baby Alex by putting him in the trash bag and then concealing the trash bag under a fresh liner. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I think the jury will find a lot of consciousness of guilt simply based on not alerting anyone to the birth of baby Alex. Should baby Alex have not been born alive, alerting people to his birth could have saved his life. That also implies consciousness of guilt. The defense in the Alexee Trevizo case is fighting a huge issue with their defense. Number one, if they are to say that baby Alex appeared to not be alive to Alexee, she had no knowledge of baby Alex being alive in order to avoid being convicted on a murder charge of knowingly killing a live baby, the question still remains to most people who see this case: why wouldn't she ask for help for a baby who appeared to not be breathing that she just gave birth to? It implies a consciousness of guilt that the baby very much was alive, very much was intentionally murdered. Because most people who give birth having no knowledge of their pregnancy and having done so in a hospital bathroom would alert the medical staff and ask for help, not only for themselves, but the baby that comes out of them. Even if they didn't know they were pregnant and may not have an emotional attachment to that baby yet because they may still be in shock. But there are many accounts of women who did not know they were pregnant and gave birth basically randomly, and they have gotten help for themselves and the baby and did not end up hurting the baby. So in Alexee Trevizo's case, I think it won't track with the jury that when you have a baby allegedly not breathing, you just put them in the trash and don't alert medical staff and then allow medical staff to potentially do examinations on you until the baby is found. Never once having told the medical staff that pertinent medical information of what happened in the bathroom as they are investigating and trying to diagnose you properly. That all screams consciousness of guilt. And it screams it so loud that I don't think the jury will be able to not listen. I think it will be very much in their face. And that's where the consciousness of guilt differs and why Karen Read is able to build reasonable doubt. There is not much consciousness of guilt that you can apply to Karen Read. Whereas in Alexee's case, almost all the evidence we still have screams consciousness of guilt, in my opinion. Now, finally, we will move on to one of the biggest pieces of reasonable doubt for the Karen Read case, and one that I don't think will have any reasonable doubt in the Alexee Trevizo case based on a few things. Not only is the autopsy of baby Alex seemingly very solid, the expert that has been employed by the defense in this case seems to be pretty much the worst. He does not seem to be effective. Many people he's represented are imprisoned, and he has been disgraced, which may ultimately be able to be brought up in front of the jury. It's possible that his past history may be exposed in the courtroom, and that could very much undermine who the defense's expert is, who is going to be tasked with trying to disprove the autopsy of baby Alex. I put absolutely zero stake in the defense's expert. Now, when it comes to Karen Reed and the autopsy and cause of death for John O'Keefe, things get a little odd. When it came to the death of John O'Keefe, it does not appear to be straightforward as to if the injuries on his body were caused by a vehicle. Many people have tried to reconstruct and figure out the exact way that Karen Reed's taillight could have caused injuries sustained to John O'Keefe's arm. And many people have noticed that the injuries on John O'Keefe's arm very much look like injuries from a dog bite, and the owners of the house that John O'Keefe was found dead on the lawn of did own a German Shepherd. It was very odd to see the markings on John O'Keefe's arm compared to dog bites. I would say it's eerily similar. That causes a serious amount of reasonable doubt as to Karen Reed being the cause of death for John O'Keefe, causing the bodily injuries which caused him to lay and get hypothermia on that lawn and die. They're saying she did that by hitting him with the car. Some of the injuries could potentially say otherwise, and it's not a stretch to see those injuries in light of what the defense is saying, which causes reasonable doubt. When it comes to the autopsy and cause of death of baby Alex, there is very little room to cause any hint of reasonable doubt. Baby Alex was placed in a trash bag that was very likely closed in some way. They apparently ripped the bag open after finding baby Alex. It's not been confirmed if there was a knot tied in it. One way it was described is as though you would spin a bag and put the top part of the loose trash bag underneath the other bag, which would essentially encapsulate. And only one person put a baby anywhere near or in a plastic bag, and that was Alexee Trevizo. No one else could have possibly done that in this case. From there, the defense can try to say that the morphine caused baby Alex's death, which does not seem to be medically possible and will be testified against by the state's witnesses, and the state will challenge the defense witness who will be making those claims. I do not think that the tiny, minuscule amount of morphine that was found in baby Alex's system is going to be enough to cause any amount of reasonable doubt should the jury believe that baby Alex was born alive. Which brings us to a very good point, which is to make that argument, to cause any reasonable doubt as to the cause of death of baby Alex, the defense must admit that baby Alex was alive, which admits that Alexee Trevizo put a live baby in a trash bag, which causes them to have to prove that at the time Alexee saw the baby didn't appear alive, which then expands to she still didn't get the baby help despite a baby not appearing alive. And the defense is going to have to somehow prove that Alexee never knew she was pregnant until giving birth, which still doesn't excuse now knowing that you were pregnant once you gave birth. All of that intertwined, the cause of death with the autopsy, the consciousness of guilt, the inconsistencies that may be exploited by the defense will not work, and blaming the witnesses will not work. All of this is what's within the umbrella of reasonable doubt that either of these defense teams can raise. But only one of them has a set of facts that actually lend to reasonable doubt being a possibility in a jury's mind. And that is proven by the first case, the first trial that Karen Reed had, ending in a mistrial. Not everyone was convinced by the Commonwealth, and not everyone was convinced by the defense. But that's still better for a defendant who does have reasonable doubt to not have their liberty taken from them and be marked guilty when it's not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And reasonable is to be interpreted by each individual juror. The reasonable person under the law is a fictitious person that we look to, that we reference to. And we hope that people are reasonable when they are making a decision with a defendant's future and with a victim getting justice. And we hope that the jury in the Alexee Trevizo case will see that there's not even an ounce of reasonable doubt, in my opinion, that the defense will be able to present, especially with a straight face. You have to know that they can't really believe what they're selling us, right? Everything that we've seen from the interviews with the defense attorney, they are just trying to, in my opinion, clean up the mess, no pun intended, that Alexee has made in regards to how the general public has reacted to her charges. They probably very much hope that there was a movement, how there is, for Karen Read. There are many people who say free Karen Read and support Karen Read in her innocence. And there appears to have been an attempt to try and gain sympathy or support for Alexee Trevizo that not only fizzled out, but crashed and failed. The public has spoken, and the public appears to not see any reasonable doubt when it comes to Alexee's case. Thank you so much if you've made it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you're interested in following cases like the Alexee Trevizo case to trial, please subscribe, as I'll be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's Sugar Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.